What if the world's most powerful country isn't just facing one crisis, but all of them at once? The United States is staring down rising tensions with Iran, a slow-burning rivalry with China that could define the century, and cracks at home that are getting harder to ignore. Allies are watching closely, rivals are watching even closer, and every move seems to ripple across the globe. That isn't just foreign policy anymore, it's a high-stakes balancing act where one misstep could shift the entire world order. So the real question is America still in control? Or just trying to keep up? Right now, Washington feels like it's juggling flaming swords while riding a unicycle, and insisting to the crowd that everything is totally under control. On the surface, it's still the world's most powerful country, with unmatched military reach, a massive economy, and deep alliances. But underneath that confidence, there's a growing sense that multiple pressure points are heating up at the same time. A volatile confrontation with Iran, a shocking act of violence at a high-profile political event, and a long-term strategic rivalry with China that is shaping almost every major decision. Start with Iran, because that's where things can escalate the fastest. The tension between the United States and Iran didn't suddenly appear this year. It's been building for decades, rooted in everything from the 1979 Iranian Revolution to disputes over nuclear development and regional influence. Over time, the conflict has evolved into a pattern: sanctions, proxy conflicts, cyber operations, and occasional direct military actions. What makes the current situation feel more dangerous is how quickly small incidents can spiral out of control. A strike on a military site, an attack by a militia group, or even a miscalculation in a crowded airspace can trigger retaliation. Iran has spent years developing asymmetric capabilities, drones, ballistic missiles, and proxy networks across countries like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. These allow it to project power without engaging in full conventional warfare. The United States, meanwhile, maintains a heavy military presence in the region, including naval forces in the Persian Gulf and bases across allied countries. That means both sides are constantly operating in proximity, which increases the risk of confrontation even when neither side officially wants a full-scale war. Energy is a big part of the equation, too. The Middle East remains a critical hub for global oil supply, and any disruption, real or even rumored, can send shockwaves through global markets. Prices fluctuate, supply chains adjust, and governments everywhere start paying closer attention. At the same time, diplomacy continues in the background, often quietly and indirectly. Back-channel negotiations, third-party mediators, and cautious public statements all aim to prevent escalation. But diplomacy in this context is like trying to defuse a bomb while someone keeps tapping the wires just to see what happens. Now add China into the picture, and things get even more complicated. Because while Iran is an immediate, visible challenge, China is the long-term strategic competitor that influences nearly every aspect. The rivalry between the two countries spans trade, technology, military power, and global influence. China's rise over the past few decades has been dramatic. It has transformed into the world's second-largest economy, built advanced manufacturing capabilities, and expanded its presence through global infrastructure investments and trade networks. It's also rapidly modernizing its military, with a particular focus on naval and missile capabilities, dominance in key regions. The two countries are deeply economically intertwined. They trade hundreds of billions of dollars in goods, rely on each other's markets, and share global financial systems. At the same time, they are competing for leadership in areas like artificial intelligence, semiconductor production, and global standards. That creates a strange situation in which cooperation and competition occur simultaneously. One day it's trade negotiations, the next sanctions on technology exports, the next military exercises in contested regions. It's not a Cold War in the traditional sense, but it's not exactly friendly either. Some analysts argue that this broader competition partly influences tensions with countries like Iran. The logic goes like this: controlling key regions, trade routes, and alliances can indirectly shape the balance, and while all of this is unfolding internationally, events at home are adding another layer of uncertainty. The shooting at a high-profile journalists' dinner, an event that traditionally symbolizes the relationship between the press and political leadership, was more than just an isolated security breach. It highlighted a broader issue that has been building in the United States: rising political tension and the increasing normalization of extreme behavior. Differences in ideology, media consumption, and trust in institutions have created an environment in which people often live in completely different realities. Social media amplifies this by rewarding outrage and conflict, turning political debate into something closer to a spectator sport. In that context, acts of political violence, while still relatively rare, feel less shocking than they once did. Each incident raises questions about security, rhetoric, and the overall health of the political system. When something like a shooting happens at an event filled with journalists, officials, and public figures, it sends a signal, not just domestically but globally. Because perception matters, allies look at these and wonder about stability. Rivals look and wonder about weakness. And ordinary observers wonder what's going on. There's also a symbolic layer to that particular event. The journalists' dinner is supposed to be a moment of levity, where politicians and reporters poke fun at each other and briefly set aside the usual tension. It represents a kind of democratic tradition, the idea that power can be questioned, mocked, and held accountable without fear. When violence intrudes into that space, it disrupts more than just an evening, it challenges the sense of normalcy. There's also a strategic rivalry with a rising power that is reshaping the international system in slow but significant ways. At home, the political environment feels increasingly divided, with moments of instability that capture global attention. None of this means the United States is in decline or on the verge of collapse. It still has enormous strengths: a large and innovative economy, leading universities and research institutions, a powerful military, and a network of alliances that spans the globe. But strength doesn't eliminate risk. In some ways, it just raises the stakes. What makes the current moment feel dire to some observers is not any single issue but the combination of them. Each challenge on its own might be manageable. Together they create a sense of strain, like a system being pulled in multiple directions at once. There's also a timing issue. Many of these challenges occur simultaneously, limiting the ability to focus. Policymakers have to divide attention between immediate crises and long-term strategy, between domestic concerns and international commitments. And in a fast-moving world, delays or missteps can have amplified consequences. Institutions adjust, public opinion shifts, and new strategies emerge. The question is not whether challenges exist, but how effectively they are managed. And here's where a bit of irony comes in. For years, American political discourse has emphasized strength, leadership, and control. Can shape global events, set the rules, and respond decisively to threats. Now, it's navigating a world where control is less absolute, where other players have more influence, and where unpredictability is the norm. It's like being used to driving on an open highway and suddenly finding yourself in dense, chaotic city traffic. You still have the same car, the same skills, but the environment has changed, and the margin for error is much smaller. So what happens next? With Iran, the likely path is continued tension mixed with periodic de-escalation. Neither side benefits from a full-scale war, but both are willing to push boundaries to gain leverage. That means the risk never fully disappears. With China, the competition will continue to evolve. It's a long-term dynamic that will shape trade, technology, and geopolitics for years to come. There will be moments of cooperation, but the underlying rivalry isn't going away. At home, the trajectory is harder to predict. Political divisions may deepen before they improve, and incidents of instability may persist. But there are also efforts, through policy, dialogue, and institutional reform, to address these issues. In the end, the United States is not uniquely chaotic or uniquely stable. It's a powerful country in a complicated moment, dealing with the kind of overlapping challenges that come with its position in the world. Which brings us back to that original image, the juggling act. The difference is, this isn't a performance. There's no script, no guaranteed ending, and no easy applause at the finish, just a series of decisions, reactions, and adjustments playing out in real time. And maybe that's the most honest way to understand it, not as a simple story of crisis or control, but as an ongoing balancing act in a world that's getting harder to balance.